right, welcome to the Solution Point, where we find solutions for your life, the law, and your business. And before we get too far ahead, remember to hit the subscribe button and like this, especially if you like what you hear as you go along. Let me introduce you to my co-host, Catalina Dickerson.
Hi, everybody.
Now, today we have a special guest. He's a good friend of mine from New York. He's attorney Joseph Marra, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what his practice area is there, and then he's going to share with us a problem and a solution that he's got for us. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Kat. Thank you both for inviting me to participate in this. I was really looking forward to it. A little bit about me. I was born in the Bronx and raised in the Bronx. And my first job out of law school was at the Bronx District Attorney's Office. And while I was in law school, I worked for the attorney who was actually Joe Torre's personal attorney when he managed the Mets. So I got to spend a lot of time around a lot of athletes and go to various events, which was a lot of fun. But I have an accounting background, and I started at the Bronx DA's office, and thinking I was pretty sophisticated, having grown up in the Bronx, it turned out I wasn't that way, because even though it was only 6 or 7 miles away where the courthouse was and where everything was happening, it was like a world away compared to the culture and the incidents that I saw. But after a couple of years there, I said, well, I really want to go back into the accounting area. And I got a job with Deloitte. At that time it was Deloitte Haskins and Sells in their tax department, where I also received an LLM in tax. But after a couple of years there, and by the way, I worked on the 101st floor of One World Trade Center when I was there. And actually now my son got a job on the 84th floor of the new One World Trade Center. But while I was there, I said, this is not for me. I can't do this the rest of my life. I will shoot myself. So I went back to work for the guy I worked for in law school. And then I opened up my own practice. So that's basically, I'm married, 2 children. Basically a little background on me.
All right. Well, tell us. So your practice area is kind of in the business and tax based on your background.
It is. We do a lot of elder law, and one reason for that, Mike, is when I had just gotten out of law school, my mother became very sick, and she was actually sick for 7 years before she died.
Oh, wow.
And I found that we were consulting with elder law attorneys, and I said, gee, if I'm going through this, look at the aging population, other people are going to go through it.
Yeah.
So before I opened my old practice, and while I was there, I educated myself a lot on elder law.
Yeah.
And one thing that was good about that too is because I had the criminal background and I worked for a generalist before, and I worked in tax, people would come with problems, and basically I didn't have to consult with other attorneys because I had the background in those areas. I mean, you get things like, and it happens today, at least up here, you got 2 older people in their 70s or even 80s sometimes getting divorced, and they have elder law issues. So we can handle both at the same time without bringing another attorney in. So basically, and because of the criminal, I also did a lot of criminal work, particularly early in my career. One thing I did a lot of, we had one of my good friends became a partner and a counsel for the Archdiocese of New York. And back in the late 90s, early 2000s, she referred about 25 cases involving priests and other religious people accused of malfeasance. So I handled a number of those, and a few of my cases made it to the front pages of the tabloids here in New York. And one case in particular I'm pretty proud of is a white Irish Marist brother. For those of you who don't know, a brother's like the kind of the male equivalent of a priest, who was working in the South Bronx, and he was accused of raping an 11-year-old black student of his. And I don't think he did it, but he did have other issues. He liked to smack kids around. He was kind of a closet alcoholic. So he had other issues, but I don't think he raped his child. And I was able to get him acquitted. And, that was quite an accomplishment in those days. But now the transaction is more morphed into the transactional real estate, estates, estate planning, matrimonial. I have 2 attorneys working for me, and both of them are doing different things. One in particular is doing most of the litigation work. And then we have other staff helping us out.
Great. Well, tell us about the problem and solution that you've got to share with our viewers and listeners?
You know, Mike, it's very interesting because I have a problem and I have a solution, but I find that people don't always take your advice and follow the solution, so it still becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Give you an example. The biggest problem is many times clients do not tell their lawyers everything.
Mm.
That is a big problem. Not only that, they sometimes lie to your face.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I don't know why. I mean, there's many reasons you could say why, but if you really think about it, um,
There aren't any good ones.
yeah, there aren't any good ones. And the main reason you're going to an attorney is to assist you. And if he doesn't know all the facts, how is he going to assist you? And people also sometimes don't realize that everything you say is supposed to be confidential. And if it isn't, an attorney can be suspended or lose their license for giving up the information. So, you know, if somebody in my personal life tells me something, if they don't tell me to be quiet, I'm the biggest gossip and blabbermouth in the world. But when somebody client comes in the office or someone tells me, please don't share it with anyone, it never leaves me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people realize that or they don't understand it, but it's a common problem. And I'll just give you an example. And now just another example that reared its ugly head after I tell you what my solution is. But someone came into me a number of years ago, and he was an older Italian-American gentleman, had a wife and two kids. And he and the wife came in, and basically they said, you know, we need wills and everything else. And they came in with one of the daughters. So I spoke to you know, them, and I said, you feel comfortable with your daughter here? Oh, yes, absolutely. I says, maybe you wanted to leave. No, 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 we want to hear. Okay, fine. And one of the questions I asked was, is anyone in your family under any type of disability? No. Anyone receiving government benefits? No. And then questions along those lines, which I usually ask when you're doing planning for people. Well, a number of years later, the wife died, then the husband died. And guess what? I then found out that the daughter who was sitting in the room with me had suffered from severe depression, and she was on disability, and she was receiving Social Security disability. And what did that do? It totally blew away the estate plan, right? Because she was getting half the money. And had I known this, we could have set up a supplemental needs trust here in New York to protect the money for her, right? And on top of that, I get a call from the sister who says, you know, my sister's crazy. And I'm like, no. And she tells me, and she says, now she's living in the house. And the other thing that he made me do was give her a life estate in the house. And, you know, I basically, I'm stuck here until something happens to her, and God knows what's going to happen to this house while she's living there. So this became a major problem. And if he had told me up front, would have been something we had dealt with. And just as a PS, as a postscript, I go to a wedding once, and I introduced myself to the parents of the bride, and they're looking familiar to me. And I'm like, she goes, oh, Joe, nice to see you again under different circumstances. I'm going, who is this? Who is this person, right? That night I go to bed. I wake up in the middle of the night. Now I know who it was. It was one of the daughter who didn't have the issue. And needless to say, the other sister was not at the wedding. So, but and what do I do? What's the solution to that problem? Is to try to impress upon the client the importance of it by giving them examples just like this as to why you need to tell me. Because if you don't, I cannot properly help you. When I was doing the cases involving the priests, and this was kind of odd because, believe it or not, I once was representing a priest who was the principal of my Catholic high school after I graduated. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And I told him, I said, look, and I told all the priests that I represented, look, plaintiff's attorneys, these are, or the prosecutor, if it was a criminal case, because I handle both for them, defending the criminal case and the civil cases. So they have a lot of resources. These are big firms or they're government agency. And they're going to be doing a lot of research, and everything on you, anything you ever did in life is going to come forward. And if I am blindsided, I am not going to be able to help you. And then I would explain to them cases where that happened. And, you know, most times people will tell you, but even with that, they don't tell you. I had someone come into my office yesterday, as a matter of fact. Her friend did a will, and I did the will for the friend back in 2019. And I looked back at my notes and I interviewed her. And she said, well, I'm one of 7 children. She was from Puerto Rico originally, one of 7 children. And she was married, but her husband had predeceased her, and she had no children of her own. And immediately, I'm sure it's the similar in Texas, but you have to give notice to people who would take if there were no will.
Yeah.
And I said, well, these other people, they have to be notified, and explained everything. And I told her about cases I usually do where I had problems. One time I had to fly a genealogist in from Italy to prove the family tree. And I explained that. Okay. So she tells me out of all these siblings, one of them had 1 child and another had 2 children. And I'm in contact with them. And great. So I still suggest you do a trust, but it's not going to be a big deal when you die. Okay. Well, now she died, and the executor, who's a friend, comes in. And it turns out, and the executor didn't, I said, this is what I think. She goes, well, I don't really know. So 2 of the nieces and a grandniece are listed as beneficiaries. Let's call them. I find out that one of her siblings had between 12 and 18 children, and some of them are dead.
Wow.
And one of the people who was a beneficiary, this is her branch of the family. The decedent's sister was this lady's grandmother. It's okay. Well, you should be able to. She says, I don't know. I don't know. She had so many kids. We don't talk to my cousins. So now this is going to be great for me because I'm going to make a lot of money on this case, but it's not so good for the beneficiaries of the estate. And all of this could have been avoided. And I showed her my notes here. This is what she told me. And I specifically asked, and that's why you do that, right? And
Yeah.
but people sometimes don't listen. And but you have to. That's the problem. That's the solution, is to basically try to explain to them how it could come back to bite them in the rear end if they don't disclose what they really should to me. But still, that's not a cure-all. It's not a total solution.
And Joe, that's a very good point, because we've had some clients come back recently, similar case where I don't know if they do muniments of title in New York.
Don't know what that is.
Okay, that's probably a Texas thing. Basically, you just submit the will, and the will transfers title. And so we did this for a client, and I was looking, it was like in 2003. And I actually even took the case over from somebody else, and we did that. And then he's like, hey, why didn't I get appointed as the executor of the estate? This is now, 15 plus years later. And it's like, well, because you had already started down this road, and you probably didn't want to pay a lot of fees for administration if all we were doing is transferring the property. So now we have to open up an administration, and he's the one thing is not telling you everything, and the second is pretending like they don't understand what you've explained to them 5 times. And in writing.
Exactly. Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, we're not always perfect in doing this. Whenever I see an issue, I try and send a letter on it or an email, and then make sure it's saved.
Yeah.
And particularly with estates where there's children involved, where I know it's going to be a problem, where I say you really should do a trust for X, Y, and Z reasons, and they don't want to do it. That'll go in a letter, and then when the kids come back, here's the letter. Yeah. I sent this to mom, and mom didn't want to follow my advice. So
yeah. You bring up a good point. I mean, and it's that documentation, it's that due diligence, and that's another solution to it. And it's, it takes that effort, but it is well worth it, because it's verbally what in here, out the other, and on paper it does, does make a difference. I have a question here. You talked about impressing on them the importance of how important it is, and we were talking and mentioning about attorney-client privilege. Do you think maybe there is, and I can, I'm just thinking about it, I can imagine that it might be lost on people of what that phrase means, in such a world where social media, and you express every whim, and every, talking point, it's so easy to communicate, that we're in a kind of a mindset that, what, let me shut my mouth because I don't really know what's going on. Could there be, more awareness? Should we as attorneys be, more vigilant in creating more of this awareness?
Well, you know, that is a very good point, but people, I mean, people are not going to believe you. I know that it's happened to me where people that I'm close to would prefer to go to a stranger. And I just had, there's an elder law attorney here in Westchester County, New York, where I am. He actually used to be a neighbor of mine, and he's one of the top elder law attorneys in the county. And just recently, his wife's first cousin came to me, and she's very close to the wife. But she says, you're probably wondering why I'm not going to Anthony. And I'm like, well, yeah, I just don't really want them involved in this level. But just she's naming the wife as, you know, so for whatever reason, people also think that, okay, even though you don't specifically disclose it, well, how do I know you're not going to disclose it? Like you may disclose it, or you may do it in a way that you can't be found guilty of disclosing it, but you're
Right.
still going to convey the
It's
issue.
a
So I don't
culture,
know.
it's a culture of mistrust that has been incubated.
Absolutely.
And we need to kind of break that down. And so, yeah, it's important. It's important to, and
and
we stress that with our employees, because maybe it's not the attorney, but then they might mistrust, you know, the staff as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And we make sure that we let our staff know, you know, that is, there are boundaries, you know, that have to be abided by.
It's very important, very important.
And I think, you know, our brethren attorneys don't help the situation, because, you know, you know, there's always the watering hole where attorneys hang out, and you can kind of sit and listen like a fly on the wall, and you can figure out who they're talking about, especially if you're in a small town. Oh yeah, my client said, you know, my client, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but he's the guy that has the trucks and this and that and the other. And so he's in this problem that's been in the newspaper, and that's my client. And so this is what we're going to do. And it's like, okay, everybody knows who you're talking about. Even though you didn't say the name, everybody knows who you're talking about. And so that kind of puts a perception that, you know, they're not going to disclose the name, but
right.
your dirty laundry is still going to be exposed. It's just nobody's going to know. It's not going to have your name on it. Like one of our scoutmasters used to say, you know, tell your parents not to put your name on your underwear, because if you lose them, you don't want them to find out who they were. So I mean, I think that's kind of, as professionals, we need to tighten the ship. And I know I'm speaking to the choir, but I think that's something important. The other example that I've used, especially when I've had some clients that had like some sensitive stuff that they're like, I really, you know, need to be able to talk to you about this stuff, and that it's not going to leave this room. And I say, look, I'm kind of like the priest in the confessional, except you get to pay me. So it kind of helps, you know, we're a predominantly Catholic city, so you know, it's not lost on people. But that's another way that I try to kind of put forth that, you know, if, you know, whatever you tell me is completely confidential. And you know, the other thing is, like you said, you're only hurting yourself by not telling me everything, because there could be a ticking time bomb that's gonna blow up, and it may blow up when your grandkids receive things, and not, you know, I'm not going to be here anymore, and it's going to be more difficult to fix the problem after 2 or 3 generations of people are gone, and you don't have any living people to sign something or to be able to swear an affidavit or anything, because they were never around. They never saw these people. They never met them. They don't have any knowledge. So,
but it's interesting. People not telling you the facts or actually lying to you is just it's just amazing. Here's an example. I had this couple that was going through a very contentious divorce, and they had adult children. They were together 25 plus years. It was, you know, you're wondering why it got to this point, but be that as it may, she took out an order of protection against him. Okay. And basically a total stay away order of protection. Stay away. And I don't know how Texas enforces these things, but New York, is crazy the way he enforced them. So one day he is driving by the house. Where she's living, driving by the house. She's driving the other way and she sees him. She goes to the DA's office, takes out a complaint that he violated the order of protection. And I told him, I said, it was a total stay away. What you do? All I was doing was driving by the house. I said, well, I understand that, but it's total stay away. I mean, stay away from the house. You had no reason to be there. What were you doing? Well, that's my normal route to work. You know, he had his own business and he was in, it's funny, New York, just as a quick, before I did the story, New York is a huge place, as you know. I mean, we're a tri-state area with 25 million plus, but still it's an area of neighborhoods. And our neighborhoods are like your little villages and towns, right? So where this person lived, he was in that neighborhood. I mean, he moved out of the house, got an apartment in the neighborhood. His business was in another part in the neighborhood. And he said, well, look, if you look at a map, this is the fastest way to go by it. Okay, well, that's a defense. Now, this is a misdemeanor, by the way, in New York. Misdemeanor. Okay. So we go to court and we go to trial and I put him on the stand. And guess what he says? I had no reason for being there. I just wanted to drive by the house to see how the house looked.
Oh.
And I'm sitting there like, what? You know, like what? And after he got convicted, I said, what are you told me, like, and repeatedly, we went over this and just what you told me.
You showed me the map.
Right. I'm like, oh, I don't know. But he lied. He made up a lie. And then for some reason, when he got on the stand, I guess he swore and he couldn't lie under oath. And he told the truth.
And to be honest, Joseph, I mean, that could be very well the truth. In the core, his heart was exposed and, you know, it came out like true love. But he probably wanted to see, you know, who's around, how's it looking, is it in shambles? But yeah, the truth comes out and guess what? The consequences then follow.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people these stories all the time. This is why you need to tell me. You don't want to waste hours telling them. You tell them one or two that maybe will make the point and you move on, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah, like I always say, you can't save somebody from themselves.
This is true.
You know, and so we can just do the best we can, and hopefully, you know, people watch this podcast, YouTube video. When you go see your lawyer, they're there to help you. And if you tie their hands, they're not going to be able to help you. And by not providing them with all of the information and being truthful, that's going to wind up creating a problem, because the truth will always come out. And almost assuredly, it will come out at the worst possible moment for you. And that's, I mean, that's the way it works. And it's going to come back and bite you eventually. So definitely, I hope that everybody who's out there and is talking to their attorney, you know, just tell them what you've got going on. Don't hold back, because, you know, you're only hurting yourself. Now, I don't want to abuse your time, Joe. So tell, you know, here on the Solution Point, we always like to wrap up with sharing a core value. You know, and core values are real important in our firm, and I know that you have your core values, and I think the idea of core values is important for people, especially when they're starting out in business and even starting out in their lives, to have some core values, so that you always have a touchstone as to, you know, hey, I've got this in front of me. Is this, should I move forward and do this, or is it against what I stand for? And if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for anything. So why don't you share with us your core value?
One of my major core values is to be as open and honest as possible. And why is that? From a purely selfish and business point of view, why is that important? Your reputation as an attorney is everything. Okay. And if your colleagues, your adversaries know that you're an upfront person, you're going to be handled one way with them. If your clients know that, you know, I mean, one thing you have to be open and as upfront and as honest as possible. And sometimes that's difficult. And here's an example of earlier in my practice and my associates, especially when you have younger associates, it's hard to drill this into them. You have a client who, and obviously to most people aren't constantly dealing with attorneys, right? It's usually a very traumatic thing in their life. And it's the most important thing in their life. It may be the most important thing in their life at that moment. But you have multiple clients who you're dealing with their most important thing in their life, but obviously can't be the most important thing in your life. And it can't be the most important, not always the most important thing in your practice. And it's hard to tell people that. But you have to prioritize and you have to make it known. Here's a typical example. Mrs. Smith called. She wants to know what's going on with her case. And you start thinking, oh, Jesus, like I had this other stuff. It was much more of a priority. There was a statute of limitations deadline. There was this, I had to do a closing, whatever it is. And you felt in your mind that Mrs. Smith's case was able to be backburnered for you. Now, strategically, that was a good decision. And are you hurting Mrs. Smith? No, you're not. But most people, most attorneys don't want to convey that in some way to Mrs. Smith. And what happens? They don't communicate back. Mm-hmm. And that is the worst thing you can do, because you'll see the most bar complaints against, at least in this area, are for attorneys not getting back to their clients. Yep. And what I do, what I try to do, and I try to impress this on people, look, I know your matter is important, but I am sorry. There's something else that was an emergency that we had to look at, and you are on the schedule for this day. And try like hell to keep to the day you told them they're on the schedule for.
Yeah.
And if you can't, don't let it blow by. Send them an email or call. Say, look, I'm sorry. I told you this would be done by Wednesday, but it's going to get done by tomorrow. Something. Mm-hmm. You have to do that, because if you don't, you're just going to have a lot of unhappy clients, and you're going to lose clients, and it's going to wreck your reputation. Mm-hmm. And the reputation is the most important thing you have.
And it kind of brings me back to a little bit about what Richard James spoke about. We had Richard on the show, and Richard is a mentor for the three of us. And we talked about profitability and how to maximize your profit. And the foundation to it is by making sure that you give the utmost best service. And a big part of the utmost best service is just giving that quick little follow-up call. And like you said, and you don't even have to apologize. You say, we have you, on our list of projects or what we're working on. And like you said, something came right in front of it, but I want you to know that we didn't forget about you. Then that's the thing, is they're waiting by the phone. For whatever case it might be, it is the center of their world at that moment. Mm-hmm. It is the thorn in their side. And we have to remember to have compassion, and to remember that just that little touch, it will put them at ease. They'll be able to sleep at night. It makes a world of difference. And when we get the calls in, I'm kind of like, I'm the overseeing. That's how we handle it here. And everyone's really good about, touching base with the calls. We have systems to make sure that we're ahead of it as well. But I'll be looking at it and I'm like, okay, and I see this call and I'm going to forward it to y'all. Who's on top of this? I want to know who's going to be giving them a call back sometime today. Oh, that's mine. I'll take care of it. I'll call them after lunch. Great. And it's also that internal communication with your team too. And so they know that it's important, and know that it's important to get back to the people we serve.
And along those lines, sometimes there's some time frames that are outside of our control, like hearings getting set. And I don't know how it is in New York, but probate is probably low on the totem pole, because it's like, all right, they're not going to get any more debt, so we don't there's not an urgency. If it's criminal, well, we've got to get them processed within a certain time because of their constitutional rights. Divorce, hey, well, there could be some stay away orders, so we need to move these quick to get them divorced, so that way we can keep the peace. Personal injury cases, we need to get those cases settled so that the plaintiff's attorneys can continue making their campaign contributions and, mm-hmm. and keep things going. Now we can deal with whatever's left, and so, sometimes it's a bit slower in the probate side. Plus, there's a lot of, administrative hoops that we need to run through. And even when we explain it to the clients, they hear it and they understand the words you're saying, but then when nothing happens for 2 months, they're like, did you forget about my case? What's going on? And so we have, we keep connecting with the clients on a regular basis. One of the counties in which we work, Hidalgo County, we have filed about 2 or 3 cases back in March. We just now got the attorney-ad litem appointed like last week. And they're set for initial hearing in December.
Oh, and just so for our viewers, it's July 22nd.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Not unusual.
Yeah.
We're kind of in the same boat.
And that's kind of, here in Webb County, our judges, when they came in, their predecessors had long delay in court, so they kind of came in with the mandate of moving cases quickly. So our Webb County courts, man, they really move the cases quick. We get the initial hearing, we get the PR appointed, personal representative appointed, whether it's executive or administrator. They move them quickly, and then once they're appointed, then now you can kind of take your time in the distribution and inventories and stuff like that. But it's that beginning part that's really necessary. But sometimes clients don't understand. No. It's not in our control. It's the court's docket. The court's the one that schedules it. And we call them. So my staff knows, even if nothing's happening, you need to reach out to them, tell them, hey, we've been calling the court. They still don't have a date. We haven't forgotten about you. We're still on it. So it's just, for them not hearing anything, people don't jump to good conclusions. Oh, I haven't heard anything. Everything must be going perfectly fine. So the lawyer doesn't want to worry me about anything that's going good. If it was something going bad, they would call me. And it's, that people would want to not call if things were going bad. But people jump to the conclusion of, I haven't heard anything. There must be a crisis. Something must be going off the rails. So.
Well, it's interesting you say that too, because I live and work in Westchester County. If you're looking at a map, you have Manhattan. Just north of Manhattan is the Bronx, where I grew up, right? And then just north of that is Westchester. And each court, each county, each area, those are different counties. Even though New York City is 5 counties, by the way. Wow. That's how it's set up. Wow. So Bronx County is a world unto its own. So I have cases in all of those counties and other counties in the area, but particularly Westchester and the Bronx. And you might get someone come in and say, hey, we had my uncle or my cousin or had a case like this in Westchester, and it was handled in 2 months. What's going on? Well, you're in the Bronx. It's like this case is the Bronx. Forget it. Yeah. It takes 2 months in Westchester, takes 8 months in the Bronx. So that's another thing that people don't understand. But you can also use that in life, right? I have a friend, a woman who is in her 40s, never married, no children, a professional person. And she started dating a man and really, really fell for the guy. A very nice guy. But he has 2 younger children, and she never had children. And she said, well, I really like him. I said, one thing you have to understand is this the first relationship he's having after his divorce? Yes, it is. And he has young children? Yes. If he's the man you think he is, you are going to be number 2 in his life until these children are adults, at least, and maybe beyond. I said, and you got kids here who are 10 and 8. He's going to want to be at every baseball game, every dance recital, every soccer match. He's going to want to be there. And if that interferes with his social life with you, I'm telling you what to expect. And you could tell the person that, and then 6 months later, we're having a conversation. I really like him. He's a really nice guy, but it's so hard with these kids. He's always got to be there. And what did we talk about 6 months ago? And she goes, yeah, you're right. But it's one thing when you're telling somebody, another thing when you're living through it,
Yeah.
So you could tell people everything, but once they're living through it, they have a different perspective.
Yeah.
And they may not remember what you told them, or I don't know, they may conveniently forget it.
Yeah.
Right, well, it was fantastic talking to you, Joseph. We look forward to seeing you soon, and when we get together, all of us party animal attorneys.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well,
But we
it was,
missed you. We haven't
I
seen
know.
you in a while.
Yeah, last time I saw you guys, I think was November of 19, so in person.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys. It's going to be real good. I was trying to convince my wife to come, but she does not want to come this time. Maybe in
Aw.
November. I'll
Tell
try
her
to
I'm
get
going to
come in
be there.
November.
We can hang out.
I'll tell her that, Kat, without a doubt. All right. Thanks so
Right.
much.
Thank you very
Thanks so
much.
much.
And
Have a great
again,
week.
if you like what you heard, hit the subscribe button, click the little bell so you'll get reminders of the of when you can get to see a new broadcast. And Joe, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
You want to share your website or communicate how people can contact you if they need your help in New York City?
Sure. We're in New York. I'm also admitted in New Jersey, but we handle only Bergen County for the most part in New Jersey, although we do handle some other counties if it's worth it, but generally just Bergen. But our phone number is 914-964-6806, 914-964-6806. And our website, where you can do a chat on the website and send us an email through the website, very simple, www.Marra, M-A-R-R-A, Marra.Law, L-A-W.com.
Perfect.
So, and the email is, the firm email is pretty simple too. It's Marra.Law@Marra.com.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
Sounds good. We'll have that in our description and let people know that they can get a hold of you over there.
Thank you.
Well,
thanks, Kat.
Thanks again, and thanks
Mike.
for listening or watching the Solution Point, solutions for your life, your business, and the law. See you
Bye, everybody.
next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.